Now, once you've created a piece of content, it really only makes sense to get the most traction and the most use out of it that you possibly can. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the most compelling reasons for you to consider going through the process of repurposing your content. So the first reason that I want to get into as far as why to repurpose your content is because people have different learning styles. So take a look back at yourself in maybe 6th grade and remember a time when your teacher was giving a lecture on ancient Mesopotamia or something like that. Were you one of those students who was reading along in the book, or were you taking notes as she spoke? Were you looking out the window and daydreaming, or maybe doodling in a notebook? Or were you listening intently and just taking it all in as she spoke? How you answer those questions might give a peek into your own learning style. And while, of course, this isn't a scientific quiz, those questions, your preferences could be seen through how you responded in the school learning environment. So the student who was taking notes might be a ReadWrite learner, and the person who was listening intently might be an auditory learner. If you're interested in learning this sort of thing about yourself, what your learning style is, and what's the strongest method of learning for you, there's a great quiz here at Edutopia that you can take, and the URL for that will be below this video. Now, I took the quiz, and my results show that I am strongest with intrapersonal and interpersonal learning, with linguistic learning coming up third. So that means that it says I often set goals for myself, I self-manage and reflect on results, I enjoy teaching and sharing my thoughts, and I have the ability to use words effectively for reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And all of those I think are pretty applicable given my choice in careers, I think, right? But aside from just being personally interested in the results of your own quiz, the fact that different people have different strengths and different preferred ways of learning is something that you should take into account as you're creating and publishing your content. If members of your audience are highly visual learners, it would serve you to provide some visual ways of interacting with you and interacting with your content so that you can capture those people too, and not just the linguistic type of learners who prefer to read. If a visual learner lands on your webpage and it's thick with text and there's no visual stimulation, they could decide that this site is boring because it doesn't stimulate their visual learning style and click off to another option, and you don't want that. You want instead for everyone to be able to use the content that you've produced in their preferred learning style. So let's take a look at some of the main learning styles and how they might apply to the way that you'll repurpose your content to reach people with different learning styles. Now, visual spatial learners tend to picture things in their minds. To figure out the right spelling for a word, a visual spatial learner might imagine the word in their head and imagine how it would look on paper and then think about whether that looks right or wrong. When remembering a slideshow like this that you're watching right now, the images that they see on the screen will spark their memory of the content. I think of visual learners as people who always picture a concept in their head. So things like charts and graphs and interesting pictures and video are all ways that you can make your content more appealing and more memorable for visual spatial learners, and you can repurpose your existing content to suit visual spatial learners by including things like that, like pictures or repurposing something into video. Now, auditory learners might have a harder time remembering material that they've read, but they could remember it much better had they heard it in a lecture. They learn best by hearing, by participating in discussions, or if they're reading text, they might actually repeat the key points out loud to themselves to help them remember. So they're the kind of person who can actually do better with background noise, like the music or TV when they're doing homework or studying, because that background noise helps them concentrate. And they're also the kind of people who might prefer to use speech recognition software like Dag and Dictate over writing. So to cater to the portion of your audience that are stronger auditory learners, you might repurpose your content to include a spoken narration. Using background music in a video will also help auditory learners because they associate the patterns in the music with the material that you're covering. ReadWrite learners are the kind of folks that you imagine to be the perfect students in school. They're the stereotypical 4.0 GPA kids, or grown-ups for that matter. They absorb the material that they're trying to learn very well just from reading it, so they're great blog readers, but they might not care as much for video or audio kinds of posts or content. They also learn really well by writing things down, so they're the type that will retain more if they take notes on materials. You can repurpose materials that are auditory or visual. You can repurpose those for read-write learners by providing a transcript so that they can read the information. And you can also give out supplementary materials like worksheets so that they have the opportunity to write things down and help them retain the information that you're putting out there. Now, another reason to get into the habit of repurposing your content is to allow people to access it while they're on the go. Just like we want people to be able to absorb our content in whichever format they enjoy the most based on their learning style, we also want them to be able to access the content wherever they are or in whichever format is most convenient for them wherever they are. So, of course, none of this means that every single piece of content that you create needs to be repurposed 10 times over. But you should have something available on your site for each and every learning preference. So you may have some written posts, and you may have some things that contain an audio component or some things that contain a video component here and there. You need to make certain that people can access your content, though, regardless of which device they're on, because not everybody's sitting at their desktop anymore. Or what kind of internet connection they have is another concern as well. Now, that might be as simple as making sure that your blog or WordPress blog has a mobile-friendly theme, or using a WordPress plugin like WP-Touch, WordPress Touch, to make it mobile-friendly. So on the right-hand side on this slide, we've got my site as it normally looks in a mobile browser. And on the left-hand side, here's what it looks like with WordPress Touch installed. So it's much easier to read and navigate, obviously, with the WordPress Touch plugin installed, and so that will make it easier for people on their mobile devices to consume my content when they visit my site. Now, on that blog, michellemcpherson.com, about 10% of visits come from people on iPhones and iPads and Androids and Blackberries and that sort of thing. But that is not just a phenomenon within the internet marketing niche. And these stats that you're looking at now are from another site of mine in a health niche. And this site got about 10,000 visits in the last 30 days. And as you can see from this screenshot in Google Analytics, 1,700, or over 17% of the site's visitors were actually using mobile devices to access the site. So take a peek at your own stats. I'd imagine that whatever niche you're in, you're going to see some similar numbers. It doesn't make sense to not cater to those people, as they are coming in bigger and bigger numbers. My internet marketing site has 10%. This site has about 17% of visitors coming from their mobile devices to the site, and you absolutely want them to be able to access your content in a format that is convenient and easy for them to read. So give the WordPress Touch plugin a try. It's been really great for my sites and my site visitors and the folks who are accessing the content on a mobile device. We're going to talk more about other ways to get your content on specific platforms in another video. Now, when you've taken the time to create a really great piece of content and you serve that piece of content up in several different ways, you're just going to get more people seeing it. It's kind of the law of averages. And that might mean taking a blog post and turning it into a YouTube video. That's one way of repurposing. And it might mean taking several articles and piecing them together to create a larger ebook. And those are just a couple of examples. But the point being is that the more ways that you put your content out there, the more ways that people will have to consume it, and the more ways that people will have to find it. And plus, when you host that content on platforms outside of your own site, like we talked about making a blog post and turning it into a YouTube video, you'll also be given the opportunity to create backlinks to your site. And even in this new SEO economy of social sharing being an important ranking factor, backlinks are still a very important ranking factor and not something that you should give up on or abandon. Plus, having your content out there in the wild gives people more opportunity to socially share the content, which of course is becoming increasingly important in SEO. So there is a multitude of reasons to repurpose your content, all of which lead to your establishing yourself even further as the market leader in your niche, and then to reaping the rewards of that status.